Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala khatim al-anbiya wa mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Wa ba'd. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, I begin with the greeting words of paradise. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And these are the words of peace. And I pray that these few moments that we are blessed with to spend together would be a source of peace and a source of understanding. In today's world, there are great changes going on before our eyes. And Islam, as the fastest growing religion or way of life on the planet, has been involved in a series of struggles. One of the most intense areas of struggle for Islam and Muslims is the African continent. Three countries in particular we find are constantly in the media: the Sudan, Algeria, and Nigeria. These are three great potentials, cut areas, potentials in oil wealth, potentials in agriculture, potentials in human wealth, and these areas have been blessed with great histories and strong intellectual traditions. But what is confusing for many people is that despite the rumors and despite the media information of Africa being a place of turmoil and drought and conflict, there are literally hundreds and thousands of professionals and missionaries and soldiers who are pouring into the continent and trying to establish themselves and to establish businesses and growth for the future. Even the President of the United States made an official tour to Africa recently, and the object of the tour was business. So there's a contradiction that goes on when we are given a particular picture or image of a continent, and yet we see the reality of what is happening on the ground. Also, there is a contradiction with Muslims. We see an image of terrorism, we see an image of a foreign ideology coming into Africa. But when we look at the primary sources, when we go to the root of the issue, we find something very different. Africa itself was never isolated from Europe or from Asia or from any other part of the world. But yet Africa was really the crossroads. It is one of the major areas where people have migrated from the beginning of time. It is also one of the major areas where the wealth of the planet has been extracted. The gold of the planet, the diamonds, cotton, many of the fruits of the planet have actually gone from the African continent north to Europe, or west to the Americas, or east into Asia. Also, Africa has received from Asia, it has received from Europe, it has received even from the Americas. And so it was never really isolated. Especially when we look at Islamic civilization, we find that with Islam flourishing in Andalusia in the north and reaching a high level, that within the building of the masjids, if you look at the way that the minarets have been established, and also the design patterns on the walls, the setup of the masjid itself, the flavor that goes into the color, and the way that the masjid is set apart, you will find that the masjids above the Sahara and below the Sahara are actually extensions of what came out of Andalusia. Even within the dress of the people, we find patterns within the turbans, within the outer garments, and surprisingly enough, and I was shocked when I went to Africa and had a chance to travel around the continent, African people are probably one of the most coveted people on the faces of the planet Earth. We are given an image in many cases of people who don't have clothing on. There are some areas where people do not wear clothing, but also you find that within Africa itself there are areas where people have literally layers of clothing, and modesty is considered to be a natural part of the society and the relationship between men and women. In food, there is cultural continuity. But probably one of the most important areas of cultural continuity is education. And we find that the teachings of Imam Malik, radiallahu anhu, rahimahullah, coming out of Medina, were actually established in North Africa, Andalusia, and West Africa. And it flourished within the Sahara Desert region. In that area where people did not have a lot of material things, the main focus in life was on the creator of the heavens and the earth, and also in trying to understand the natural phenomena around them. So the Maliki scholars within West Africa, coming out from their connection with the desert and North Africa, maintained this high tradition. And you find the Sanusi movement that was so powerful within the Sahara Desert region. And so it was a common practice for a young man or a young woman in West Africa that they would begin their life learning the Quran. They would learn to write with Arabic. They would write on the lawh or on the wooden slate, taking natural, environmentally friendly ink from the earth, using charcoal, and then using the natural calabash as the inkwell. And they would do the Arabic writing. And in memorizing the Quran, the student would not only just orally read the Quran, but they would take the verse of the Quran into their mind and write it down. So when you had your assignment every day, you would literally have to write it on your slate, take it home, memorize it, and then you wash it off the next day. If you don't memorize it, then you keep it on your slate. And so they would literally write the whole of the Quran on their slate. And then at the end, they would write the Fatiha, and the sheikh or the teacher would sign that slate, that they went through the whole Quran in this physical writing way. In that way, then the Quran is very solid within the memory. And it's interesting that Umar bin Said, the captured scholar who came to America, even though he was not allowed to write for decades, when he was given a pen, he wrote Surah Al-Tabarak directly from his memory, from the Quran. He still retained part of the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd al-Qayrawani, even though he was not allowed to write for a long period of time. And so education became one of the most important connecting factors between North Africa, the Sahara, West Africa, and then later to Central and down into Southern Africa. We also find the fact that because of the desert region, because of the fact that people had to migrate, that there were scholarly clans of people who were moving from one area to another, and the personalities within Islam, the great personalities and the great leaders, were actually known in other parts, and they usually spent part of their life on the road, either traveling to Mecca or traveling in a caravan from one country to another country. And so that mobile nature within the continent gave a very strong cultural continuity and a connection with Islam and civilizations throughout the world. It is important for us to remember, however, that when we think of the African continent, we should recognize the fact that civilization there was very high. There's a tendency to think that Africa is a desert and there's nothing there but drought and famine and murder, and the buildings are all broken down. But actually, when you go there, you find powerful cities, and you will find strong traces of high civilization. And even within the 20th century, going into the new millennium, you'll find bustling capitals and you'll find strong economies on the African continent itself. This is part of the misunderstanding that we have. Also, the scholarship that was developed in West Africa was shared with people throughout the world. And many of the scholars who originated from Timbuktu traveled to Hijaz, to Mecca and Medina, and their teachings went to other parts of the world. Sheikh Osman Danfodio, rahimahullah, and his teacher, Hajj Umar, that Umar actually went to Mecca, gained the teachings of Hadith and Quran, brought it back into West Africa, taught Sheikh Osman, and his teachings spread to different parts of the world. There is a discussion now going on about a document that was discovered in Jamaica called Wathiqa. And that Wathiqa, which was written right after the death of Osman Danfodio, it was calling the slaves in Jamaica to jihad or resistance against slavery. It is being connected with a document called Wathiqa ibn Fudi ila Ahl Sudan wa man sha'Allahu min al-Ikhwan. It is the treatise or the manifesto of Ibn Fudi to the people of the Sudan and those whom Allah wills from his students or his brethren. And so his teachings actually reached Jamaica, reached the Caribbean, and it was in the light of that knowledge, the resistance against evil, the continuance of writing and education, the purity within the families, within that feeling that was transported, that Africa actually found itself within the Americas. So when we speak of the continent, it is not even right to look at it as a separate entity. It has to be connected